It is December 15th, and I started working on draft 2 of Project Camelot. I rewrote the first scene of chapter 1, and I did some editing on the second scene. The foundation for chapter 1 is laid down. I do want to do some edits on it before I move on to chapter 2 because I want to make sure that it has all the information that I want to add and that everything is clear. I'm not too focused on making everything sound extremely polished, but I need to make sure that I am buffing up my descriptions and the interiority of the narrating character, because I am an underwriter and my first draft was very underwritten. It basically just had like the main like actions and the dialogue, and the only descriptions I would really like insert while I was drafting was at the start of the scene to like set the scene, to establish like the setting and stuff and what everything looks like. But like in between dialogue and stuff, I wasn't really rooting the scene in the like space of the setting. So I need to kind of like slow down the pacing of each scene and make sure that there is a good balance of all the elements that need to be there. Dialogue, action, description, and interiority, the internal thoughts of the character. And I am happy with where chapter 1 is heading. I did have to kind of rewrite the first scene because the context of one of the side characters actually changed how the interactions were to go. It's better now. It's definitely more in line with what I want the character relationships to be with those particular characters. And I worked on making the dialogue be more in line with the characters as well. I did find that when I was writing the first draft, especially of that scene, the dialogue was a bit wonky, and it was because the characters weren't interacting in the way that they really should have been. I didn't know that at the time, but now that I understand some of the side characters more, I know exactly what they should be saying and how they should be reacting to certain things. So that's my update. I won't really be writing much until after Wednesday because I have one more final exam on Wednesday. So from the evening of the 18th, I'll be free to start draft 2 properly. That's all. I have to go study now, so yeah. I realized that in like some of these early chapters, I was giving a lot of like context for the scene. So basically, like I would write the first like paragraph, or the first few lines, establishing like, okay, into like a specific character action, and then I would go back and like explain how the character got there. So basically in the start of chapter 2, the character is like in a specific room and she wants to leave, but it's a bit of like a time jump of a couple weeks between her first scene in chapter 1 and then in chapter 2. So I in my first draft I was like going through the explanation of like, oh, like she went on this journey and she's like here because she needs to do this before the next event happens. And that isn't like necessary context to just like dump at the start of the scene, because a lot of that information could be passed through like some specific details and some like dialogue later on with one of the other characters. I'm trying to like streamline the scenes right now and solidify like what details are necessary and then what I can like trim away. And then I'm also like adding like descriptive details and things that are improving the presence of the character within the setting. I've also been toying around with the way that certain interactions go. So like if like the scene I was working on today, I wrote like a little bit of like passing conversation that the narrator overhears. And I realized that the character who was saying that the thing that he was talking about, it was quite out of context for him, because I realized that with his personality and the way he acts, he wouldn't like openly talk about certain things, like anything that's problematic, like, you know, talking negatively of someone of a higher status than him. He wouldn't be like just saying that while walking down a corridor with one of the other characters who he is not like super buddy with. Like, he does trust this character. They are friends. At the very least, I am recognizing when I'm writing things that are out of context for certain characters, and I can recognize like when something isn't working, and I can change it like when I am going back in to edit the chapter. So yeah, I did like see like I had a lot more trouble with that while I was writing the first draft, because I didn't get like the full sense of what these characters were doing and like what they were heading towards yet. And now that I've like finished the first draft, I know who they are at the start and who they need to be at the end. So I can kind of tell now that I have like all of this additional information about them, and I've like written their character arcs to the end, what they would do and what they wouldn't do, and when I'm like writing off track, and I need to backtrack. So I'm currently working on chapter 3. That's where I left off last night. I have to finish up the first scene, and then I have another scene to write. I finished chapter 2 at 3100 words, which is about 400 words more than what it was in draft 1, which is good. The goal of this draft 2 is to include all of the necessary details and to flesh out all of the scenes, have the character arcs and all the main plot lines be complete, have it be readable, so that if someone were to give feedback on this specific draft, they would have a good sense of like where the book is supposed to be, so that I can get like good feedback on the structure and the pacing and the clarity of the plot lines and stuff like that. I think the sooner I get feedback on especially the second half of the book and the payoffs of like certain characters' plot lines, like arcs of the antagonists or the antagonistic characters, because there is a bit of a spectrum in this book. Those like arcs I would really like some feedback on, because I don't know if I feel confident in my approach of how I'm doing the central conflict. Like I do think the final antagonist is foreshadowed for sure, because it's such a like central part of Arthuriana, and that final antagonist facing one of the main characters is essentially like prophesized. It's a conflict that you know is building and is going to happen, but there is technically two other antagonists. One of them is there from the beginning, but he's not like the true antagonist, I would consider, because I don't really think like defeating him brings a huge amount of like growth and like lessons learned for the main characters. He does for some of the side characters though, because some of the side characters get absolutely messed up by that antagonist. And then the third major antagonist is maybe like a little bit unexpected, but I think it should make sense based off of how things are shown. Like it will make sense in the context of like reading how the plot progresses. That third antagonist is by far, to me, like the most important and definitely my favorite, in terms of like what they bring to the story, and they're definitely like a foil of the main protagonist in some interesting ways. Definitely that antagonist is in some ways like the complete opposite of the protagonist, but the antagonist's intentions are never like, well, for most of the book it's never to for power or to wage war or anything like that. It's a lot more personal, and it just kind of spirals out of control into something that they can't end up controlling. I don't know if that made sense. So an interesting thing already is that because I've restructured the book and cut two of the narrators, a lot of the chapters, a lot of scenes have been cut, and whatever information that was included in those scenes that were cut has to be relayed to the narrating characters somehow. So I ended up cutting chapter 2 already, because this entire chapter was from one of the narrators who I chopped out of the book. She's still there, but you know, we don't get this this information firsthand. I think like this chapter was really weak though. I did add this like later on, so it ended up being like written in a kind of meandering way. I've noticed that with my early drafts, like my zero draft and my first draft, it's the scenes always end up being very like wishy-washy and like meandering. Like I'm trying to figure out where it's supposed to go, because I know like certain bits of information need to be revealed, and certain things need to happen in order to progress the plot. But a scene is so much more than just those points. Like, it's made up of so many different factors. But it's been really nice to rewrite the scenes because I'm going into them with a much clearer idea of where everything needs to go and what needs to happen. I can hear the characters' narrations in my head because I know them a lot better now. I can visualize the settings a lot clearer, so everything is just a lot more detailed in draft 2 already. I actually thought I would include my like little reading wrap up here one time, because I don't think I'm gonna make like a separate video for it. I'm just gonna give like some general stats. I'm actually like currently reading 7 books at once. I would say technically 3 because I've been reading Priory of the Orange Tree still. I'm like 50% into the book finally. I've been chipping away at Devotions by Mary Oliver, and I've been reading Neuromancer by William Gibson. So in total for 2024 I read 25 books. So in January I read 3 books, February I read 1 book, March I read 4 books, April I read 4 books, May I read 4 books, finished. June I finished 3 books, July I finished 2, August I finished 3, and then I haven't finished anything since. My average rating is 4.04. My top 3 genres are fantasy, romance, and literary, with 14 tagged as fantasy, 12 tagged as romance, and 5 tagged as literary. I also had 2 science fiction. Those 2 were Becky Chambers, A Psalm for the Wild-Built, and A Prayer for the Crown Shy, I think. I have 3 historical. Ooh, okay, so the historicals were Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, Most Ardently, Gabe Cole, Novoa, and Swimming in the Dark. That was a really good book. I can't believe I finished that this year. But yeah. And I also had like 18 books tagged as LGBT+. So, and I read majority medium-paced books. My most frequent moods are emotional, adventurous, and reflective. I think that's like everything that Storygraph shows you. My like writing rituals are having a cup of coffee, and then I will loop the second half of, well, not even the second half, like the last third of Light of the Seven, which is a Game of Thrones soundtrack. It's either season 6 or season 7. I think it's season 6. And that just to me like sounds like the climax of Project Camelot, so it really gets me into the headspace. Hello, it is December 25th. It's Christmas. I have been kind of jumping around within part 1 of the book and buffing up scenes that I feel like working on. I'm having to rewrite some of these later scenes in part 1 because I changed certain plot aspects, and so that needs to be reworked. So I have some new iterations of scenes to draft. Something I've also been kind of toying around with is just like within each chapter, you know, like I want there to be a certain arc, I want there to be a certain focus of the chapter, and I've been kind of playing around with ideas for things to weave into certain scenes to carry forward. I'm obviously not introducing too many plot threads in part one, because the most important thing is just to establish like the main setup for the main plot line going forward with the book. Another thing I've been like debating is how the main character, the FMC, and her love interest should start to get to know one another. It does make sense from Act 1 for them to just kind of befriend one another, but I want there to be a certain level of tension and intrigue with each of them, in that I don't necessarily want them to trust one another. So I'm trying to, in equal parts, make them both interested in one another, in the sense of like, ooh, this person isn't what they seem to be, but also creating this level of distrust that gets like kind of unraveled and explored later down. So that's kind of been like something I've been chewing on and trying to figure out like how that gets like set up. Like, do I want them to like have an argument on this meeting? Do I want them to have like a really kind based interaction? I do think they should technically have like a good start of their their relationship. Then by the end of, so the part that I'm like debating is basically like when to have the love interest start to question the motivations of the FMC, because there is like a point in time where the love interest starts to like see through her mask, like what game she's playing, and so that's kind of like the thing that starts to pull her in more. She wants to like uncover like what is like the person underneath this act, and so I really am trying to like pace it in a way that it feels very organic and like slow burn, no, not slow burn, but just so that it doesn't build up too fast. I don't want the immediate intrigue to come off as immediate attraction. So that's kind of like the thing that I'm kind of toying with. Also, there's like a similar level of intrigue and like trust versus distrust with the FMC and the MMC, because their friendship is like one of the major relationships I wanted to explore in this book. To me, it's always been like their friendship is such a huge deciding factor in essentially like the success of the protagonist, the FMC. And I think without that friendship, you know, she would put up a good fight, but it's this kind of level of understanding between them that determines the ending. So yeah, I'm just like, these relationships I have just been kind of like trying to see like the best points to add section developments, and how it like ties in with the scenes and chapters that those things happen in, but also like if it's being paced well. It's the 4th of January, happy 2025, and my draft 2 document for Project Camelot is at 56,000 words. I'm kind of shifting my process a little bit in that I wanted to write all the new scenes first before I kind of like start working my way into like smaller edits. So I transferred all my usable scenes from draft 1 into my draft 2 document, and I've been going through and outlining the new scenes that I need to write, and I'm also taking note of the scenes that are already written that need a rewrite, and then once those are done, I will go through another pass from the beginning and focus on like more specific edits. Right now I'm just focusing on making the book functional, so I'm focusing on character and plot, the structure, the pacing, making sure that like my themes are shining through in all the major scenes, and really focusing on the important character relationships. And I think before I start my draft 3, I'm gonna do a reread and see what the weak points still are in terms of character and plot and structure, and I'll focus on that alongside more line level stuff in draft 3. But because of how my brain works, I can't work chronologically with writing new scenes and trying to flesh out certain scenes, because when I'm drafting, it takes a lot for my brain to like lay down those pieces. So in one scene, there's the setting, there's the characters that are involved, there's the major plot beats that need to be accomplished in the scene, but there's also a lot more like subtle things that are going on, and my brain is very like one track. I can only focus on one thing at a time, basically. So by going through and just laying down the foundation, I'll be able to come back and flush out those finer details later. I'm like repeatedly surprised at the fact that I'm still not losing faith or losing interest in this project. Like I'm still seeing the strength. I'm still seeing things that I enjoy about it. I'm finding like new little threads that I can follow that I can tie into the book. It's been very good for my motivation because I don't think I've been so consistent with a project ever. Like even this is like the first time I'm doing like a second draft, and I wrote my first draft, my 0 draft, in like a really short time frame. It's like every day I'm off from school right now, so every day I wake up and I know I need to write. I feel the obligation. Like as naturally as like, oh, I have an assignment due and I need to work on it. It's like, oh, I have to get this much done today, or at the very least like write a few hundred words. So every day since I've been on break, I've worked on the book, which I don't think I've ever done that with a writing project before. Like, I usually have off days. I usually have days where I just don't feel like writing, but I've been working on this every day. It also helps that like the draft is written and this is a second draft where I'm just doing edits. So this is like, for me, the best part of the process. It's the best part is fixing what's already there. The book as it is right now, I said before that I originally in my first draft had 4 narrators and I cut 2 of them. And one of those narrators that I cut, I've been kind of grieving for the last like couple days because she had a lot of really interesting scenes. She had a lot of important scenes. And those are just like words that I had to cut completely. The rest of her scenes I had to switch to being narrated by my FMC or my MMC because there's like important information that needs to be provided. Yeah, I'm just feeling a little bit sad about not having her be a narrator anymore, but the book is stronger the way it is now, and it's been forcing me. I've realized that when I am struggling with plots and with subplots, I will add point of views. The last 2 books that I wrote were both multi-POV fantasy books, and there were definitely more points of view than there needed to be. Like those characters could be there, but they don't need to be narrating, and it kind of takes away from the central characters. My like instinct is always to add a point of view, to add more context and to fill out the subplots, and I think it's like a little bit of like a crutch that I need to break. It makes the points of view of the main characters weaker. So I'm glad that I like committed and cut the points of view that were necessary, even though I love those characters, because it's kind of been forcing me to problem solve in different ways, and the plot of the book is tighter now for sure. I just wanted to wrap up this vlog here. It's gone on a bit longer than I expected, and I feel like the footage that I have is a bit boring. I'm in part 2 of my revisions right now. I'm doing developmental edits and it's been going well, but I also feel, just with how my brain works and how my process is, I move around a lot, and so I'm not making like linear progress, but I've been like trying to keep on track and just go in order and just take notes of like the things later on that I need to add or rework, so that I'm not just like being too chaotic. But I find that when I'm still working on like structural stuff, plot stuff, working non-chronologically really works for me, but I'm trying not to be too chaotic. So I've been working like within each part of the book. So I spent a lot of time on part one, and I was moving between chapters, and then I've been working on part two. The book is at about 57k right now. That is with all of my like usable scenes from draft one carried over into the draft 2 document, and considering that I cut a lot of scenes, and I'm already at about the word count of draft 1. My draft 1 was about 57 to 58k. The fact that I'm already like at that with my draft 2, and I'm not even halfway done with my developmental edits yet, is a good sign that I'm building out the book to where I want it to be. And yeah, I'm like really excited to see the book at the end of this draft, where it's like everything is in its place, and that I can really start to unpack like just like the thematic like implications in every scene, and those like subtle like character dynamics and foreshadowing and stuff. I've been doing like a little bit of that as I go along, but I think that will really come through in draft 3, because I'm going to be doing a lot more line level stuff in draft 3, and I think a lot of that like foreshadowing and those like subtle like character parallels and stuff like that, it really shows just on the line level like the comparisons you make, and those like tiny details I think really makes those elements, and also the themes as well. So yeah, happy writing. Thank you for watching.